Did God accept polygamy in the Old Testament? Why did biblical men practice polygamy? I was watching a podcast and there is this man on it. He has two wives and he was asking Pastor John Mon, one of these pastors on social media, and he was asking him, did God give David his wives? This pastor could not answer the question. And I was sitting down, I'm wondering, why can't this pastor give an answer to this question? And it made me realize that some believers do not know what God's opinion is on marriage. They don't know the type of marriage they are meant to be practicing. And let's say, for instance, you are outside and you need to defend your faith, defend God's instruction. You need to know what He has said concerning marriage, right? And so this video is going to enlighten you on what God's opinion is on marriage and whether polygamy is the marriage God has ordained for mankind. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Agalia with MS Adeolu. This channel creates content that helps you to build your faith and to live a life of purpose. Now, the most practiced form of polygamy is polygyny, where a man has multiple wives, right? And so men will be interested in this topic, right? Now, there's the law of first mention, and the law of first mention is simply that where a subject matter is first mentioned in the Bible, it becomes precedent for the interpretation of it in others, verses, chapters, or scriptures where it is mentioned. So it becomes the biblical foundation for the interpretation of other chapters where that same subject matter is mentioned. And the very first time marriage was mentioned in the Bible was in the Garden of Eden when God created Adam. And God saw that Adam needed a helper and He removed the rib from Adam and created Eve, and He presented Eve to Adam. Now, God did not present multiple women to Adam. He presented just one. So from this story of Adam and Eve, we can get the idea that God is trying to tell us that one man, one woman is enough for marriage. And Genesis 2:24 tells us that a man will leave his father and his mother and will cling to his wife, not wives, to his wife, one woman, and they will become one flesh. Now, I know that in the Old Testament we had multiple men that practiced polygamy, and I will still touch on that. But let's look at what Jesus said in the New Testament, because Jesus reaffirmed God's original design for marriage when He was asked in Matthew 19, I think from verse 4 to 6, and He was asked about marriage, and He took them back to the beginning. He said, are you not aware that in the beginning, that's in the Garden of Eden, God created them male and female? And so a man will leave his mother and father and cling to his wife, and two shall become one flesh. He did not say three will become one flesh or four will become one flesh. Jesus said two, a man and a woman, will become one flesh. So Jesus is also telling us God's idea, God's opinion on marriage. He did not refer them to Abraham or David or Solomon as the example for marriage. No, he took them back to the beginning when God established marriage, and God established a monogamous marriage, right? Now, why did these people in the Old Testament practice polygamy? Well, I want to believe that because of the fall in the Garden of Eden, the fall of man in the Garden of Eden, it became hard for men to resist temptation, to be disciplined, to live the way God has instructed them to live. And we see it in the Tower of Babel, right? God said men would have dominion here on earth, but these people, they were like, no, that's not for us. God has said His own. We are going to build a tower that would reach the skies, that would touch the heavens, and we are going to see God. So they were disobeying God's instruction. They wanted to have dominion, not just on earth, but even in heaven, right? So we see that because of the fall of man, men began to create for themselves a culture that is different from the culture that God introduced in the Garden of Eden. They began to make for themselves a way of life and custom that is different from what God has instructed them to do. And so we see that men lusted after women. It was hard for them to be responsible, to be faithful. We see that even the sons of God, the angels, the fallen angels, they lusted after women, and That's how the practice of polygamy, amongst other vices, began, right? Because of the culture that men adopted for themselves, not the culture of God that they were supposed to follow. Now, if you look at these examples of men who practice polygamy in the Bible, you will notice that the marriage, they were never peaceful. They were never peaceful. Look at Abraham. Even though I personally believe that Abraham is not a polygamous man, because Agar was not a wife. She was like a surrogate. He never married her. He did not pay her dowry. But that's a discussion for another day. If you look at Abraham, because of the mistake that he committed by having a son with Agar, there's so much division and conflict in the world right now. Christians are being persecuted, we are being killed, right? And all these things could have been avoided if he had just waited for God. Look at Jacob and Rachel and Leah. We see that there was jealousy, there was competition. Joseph, he barely escaped, like his brothers wanted to kill him, right? And he suffered for it. So there was family conflict, there was family rivalry that was going on in Jacob's family. If you look at David, whenever I read about David's family, I always wonder, is this a man that is truly after God's own heart? Because his family, that kind of family, I don't pray for it for anybody. His son slept with his wives. His son wanted to kill him. There was just so much chaos in that family, and that was because he married multiple women. Look at Solomon, the wise man, right? The one God gave wisdom to. He also went after foreign women, and they changed his heart. They turned him away from God and started worshiping false idol. This is a man that is supposedly a wise man, Abi. And at the end, he realized his mistakes, that that's not the path that he should have taken. So we see from polygamous marriage, we see jealousy, we see conflict, we see division, competition, favoritism, so many things that are not good, that are not edifying, right? And so these examples in the Bible, they are not for us to copy. We are not to copy them. They just show us that God can use imperfect people and imperfect situation to promote the plan of redemption. But the examples are there for us to just see, read about them, and learn from them. So because David married multiple wives does not mean that you too will marry multiple wives. David also killed a man. He killed a man and stole his wife. Does that mean that you have the right to also kill a man and steal the man's wife? No. So these are just examples for us to learn from their actions, learn from their mistakes, and correct them, live in a way that Christ has instructed us to live, right? And so I always ponder on men who always say that they have a big heart and they can love multiple women. I always ponder on whether this is even possible, because if you love a woman, why would you want her to fight for you? Even Jesus loves us so much. He did not ask us that we should fight for his love. He freely gave us his love. And Jesus said a marriage should be like this: the man should love his wife like Christ loves the church. So the man should freely give his love to the wife. The wife shouldn't have to fight another woman for the love of the man, and the woman will submit to the man as the church submits to Christ. So if you truly love a woman, you will not put her through that struggle, that emotional distress of having to fight for you, because even God did not say we should fight for him. So if you want to be fought over, then maybe it is something of pride, right? Something of pride. I don't understand it, and I don't think I will ever be able to understand it or comprehend it. But the whole essence of this video is to tell you that God's idea for marriage, God's purpose for marriage is for it to be between a man and a woman, one man and one woman. That is monogamous marriage. So if someone asks you, what is God's idea on marriage? We have examples of men in the Bible who practice polygamous marriage. You tell them that that's not God's original plan. God's original plan is monogamy, right? And it just happened that these men created a culture for themselves that was different from the culture God introduced in the Garden of Eden. And because of that, we have polygamy. And in polygamy, you won't have a peaceful marriage. You have so many so many disturbing things would happen, right? And one thing I also want to add before I end this video is that because we are trying to relieve the power and the fullness of God that the men in the Bible experience, and even much more than they experience, we have to live our life according to how God has instructed. You want to protect your generation. You want to protect your calling. You don't want anything to deviate or distract you from that calling or from that purpose. You don't want women to distract you from the purpose. You don't want men to distract you from the purpose, right? You don't want to be putting your attention on rivalry or solving disputes and conflicts when your full focus should be working together with the helper God has given you towards that purpose, towards achieving that goal, that vision that God has given to you. So I would say, let me just end this video right here. I hope this video has enlightened you on God's idea about marriage and that God advocates for monogamy. God is a man that values covenant, and marriage is a covenant between a man and a woman. So if someone asks you, God accepted polygamy in the Bible, tell them no, God did not. Because God was looking at them doesn't mean that God accepted it. And Jesus himself reaffirmed God's original design in the Garden of Eden. This is the end of today's video. Until next time, see you. Don't forget to like this video, click on the red subscribe button to subscribe, share this video with your family, your friends, and your loved ones. See you in my next video. Bye.